Hello and welcome. This is everything you need to know for Week 10 fantasy football. We'll highlight everything we saw in Week 9 and what it means going forward. One of the biggest stories, and we'll start here with number one, is the Indianapolis Colts. They go to Carolina and win easily. That wasn't really the surprise. What was a small surprise, at least to me, was that they finally extended the gap between Jonathan Taylor and Zach Moss. JT, 45 snaps, Moss 13. JT, 21 routes, Moss 4. JT, 23 opportunities, Moss 7. So even though Zach Moss has played really, really well, as we've been talking about, you cannot pay Jonathan Taylor all this money to sit there and watch Zach Moss every week. It seems like the Colts are now leaning in to JT. How sticky do you think that is, Evan, and anything else you saw from the Colts?
I think it's probably sticky. And it seemed like a decent number of people were on that the tables were going to turn in that game. You and I were a little bit more conservative with our expectations because of how well Zach Moss had played up until that point, because of the idea that Jonathan Taylor, who, hey, let's face it, has battled like a fair number of injuries over the past year and a half, that would be a means of keeping him healthy. But at the end of the day, Jonathan Taylor, clearly the more talented player, the player that the Colts can build their offense around for the remainder of the season and going forward when Anthony Richardson gets back next year.
Josh Downs tried to gut it out in this game with that knee injury, came in questionable, seemed like a pretty true game time decision, ends up playing, but aggravates the same knee injury. I haven't seen an update on how bad the aggravation is, but that sucks because Josh Downs was having an awesome rookie year. I'm not sure they have much to compensate for that going forward. Any thoughts on the Downs injury?
I agree. I would probably just move a lot of his projection just straight to Pittman, Michael Pittman, who, has pretty regularly been between 8 and 12 targets on a weekly basis. And, their target distribution had become very, very narrow with Pittman and Downs at the top, and then a big gap, and then all the other complementary players. I would shift a lot of that Downs to Michael Pittman, depending on how long Downs is going to be out.
I mean, one of the reasons that I really like JT the rest of the way is because these short targets and Downs will help. I mean, Minshew is throwing to the running backs a ton. And, he's also going to hand off at the goal line where Anthony Richardson would have run some in. It's just a really good setup rest of the way for JT. Let's go to the Ravens. I thought this had a chance to be like a back and forth high scoring game, and the Ravens lived up to their end of the bargain. The Seahawks did not. 37-3. The Ravens just mashed the Seahawks here. I know Aaron Schatz put out a tweet like in the DVOA stuff, the Ravens look like one of the best teams ever. I'm not going to go that far, but they are really, really good. The big fantasy story here was Keaton Mitchell going nuts. 9 carries, 138 yards, 1 touchdown, undrafted free agent out of East Carolina. We've talked about this guy a couple times here on this podcast. He finally got his big chance and broke out. Evan, what did you think of the Ravens just massacre of the Seahawks?
I mean, I think that the consensus, and deservedly so, among football analysts, and I think even a lot of people in the league, is that the Ravens are the best team in the NFL. And that is borne out in the statistic of point differential. Their point differential is plus 115. The next best team in terms of point differential in the NFL is the Bills at plus 80. So that's a significant gap between 1 and 2 in that statistic, at least. Their offense under Todd Monken, a lot of people sort of assumed because of Todd Monken's air raid history that this would evolve into a super high volume passing attack, but that has not been the case. I mean, Todd Monken is also capable of adjusting his offensive mentality, his offensive scheme to the talent that resides on the roster. And right now, their offensive line is playing really well. Their backs are playing well. Keaton Mitchell shot out of a cannon. Mm-hmm. I went and looked back, just to refresh on his profile coming out of East Carolina, which also produced a very speedy running back once upon a time by the name of CJ2K. Keaton Mitchell, I can't believe this guy didn't get drafted.
Yeah.
He was, he was a return man, good with the ball in his hands. He is small. He's 5'9", 187, but he ran 4.37, super, super explosive. His 10-yard split, 1.48. He was highly productive at East Carolina, caught a ton of passes, 52 catches over his last 2 seasons, averaged like seven yards per carry. I remember Jeff Zrebeck, their longtime beat reporter, tweeting about him sort of constantly during training camp.
Mm-hmm.
He gets hurt. Now he gets the opportunity. These are the first carries of his NFL career. He comes in, again, shot out of a cannon. And I wonder if it's only a matter of time before he makes Justice Hill irrelevant.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, they played all 3 guys, and the running back opportunities in the first 3 quarters yesterday before the game got completely out of hand was Justice Hill 8, Keaton Mitchell 8, Gus Edwards 5. I think one of the concerns on Keaton Mitchell is that he's not going to be the goal line back, right? They're better off with Lamar at the goal line. They're better off with Gus Edwards at the goal line. But Keaton Mitchell, similar to Devon Achane or poor man's or homeless man's Devon Achane, whatever you want to say, can score from anywhere on the field. Obviously, Keaton Mitchell is an add this week. We'll talk more with Sam Sherman on the waiver show about exactly how big of a priority he should be. Speaking of Lamar, he's firmly in the MVP race, but for fantasy, the last 2 weeks just hasn't done it because the touchdowns have gone to other guys. And to me, that is the biggest difference in fantasy between Jalen Hurts and Lamar Jackson. When the Eagles get close, it is a Jalen Hurts rushing touchdown. When the Ravens get close, it has been a Gus Edwards rushing touchdown. And that makes a huge, huge, huge difference in fantasy, obviously.
Yeah. And if you look at Lamar Jackson, just his game logs, I mean, he's been under 30 pass attempts or right at 30 pass attempts pretty consistently. So again, this team really offensively and defensively can beat you in multiple different ways. And that in given weeks is going to work against Lamar when their running game is just firing on all cylinders as it was here. And that's not a bad run defense in Seattle, by the way. We just added Leonard Williams, just an extremely impressive win for probably the consensus number 1 team in the NFL.
And last thing on the Ravens real quick, I got some questions from people who were kind of panicking on Zay Flowers. I mean, Lamar only threw it 26 times in this game. Zay Flowers only saw 1 target. I think when Beckham, Bateman, and Andrews are all healthy, you're going to find games like this. It's just there's going to be a low volume passing game and there's a lot of competition. So you're going to find games like this. I'm not panicking on Zay Flowers, but yeah, expectation I think needs to be held in check here, whereas both Bateman and Beckham were banged up earlier.
He does remain the clear number 1 receiver in the unit because the other 3 guys, Beckham, Bateman, and OBJ, are essentially forming a committee between numbers 2 and 4 receiver. They're like all playing equally.
Yep. Number 3 biggest story of week 9, the Eagles and lose Dallas Goedert. First on the game, before we get to the Goddard stuff, I mean, this was a good win for the Eagles. Dallas easily could have won. And also I noted in this game, near the end of the first half, Jalen Hurts took another shot on that knee, which according to Jay Glazer is a bone bruise on his knee, took another shot on it. Near the end of the first half, looked like he was really in a lot of pain, kind of limped off, but jogged to the locker room. He still did the tush push. He still ran the ball 10 times for 36 yards and that tush push touchdown, but he does not look as explosive as a runner, but it's great to see he's still winning. Anyways, big story though, sad story. Dallas Goedert gets tackled in like an awkward way down the left sideline, ends up breaking his forearm. He's going to be out for a while. We have a sample of this from last year. Dallas Goedert missed 5 games last season. In them, Devontae Smith's target share jumped up about 7 points. He averaged 0.6 more raw targets per game and 20 more raw yards per game versus the 12 with Goddard. So we've kind of been waiting for a spot to get in on Devontae Smith here. I think this is an interesting one. Evan, what was your reaction to the Goddard injury and any other Eagles stuff?
Well, the bye is coming at a good time for them. Hopefully, I have not seen a timeline yet on Dallas Goedert. Have you?
No, but I mean, he's going to have surgery and, he catches the football. It's not going to be good.
Right. Okay. But at least I think that this week will certainly serve Jalen Hurts well. No, I mean, I was going to mention the thing with Devontae Smith, with Dallas Goedert off the field. His target share goes up pretty significantly. I think it went from 23% to 30% last year. So those are my main takeaways as the Eagles head into their bye.
Yeah. They're thin at third wide receiver. They have Julio Jones. They have Olamide Zaccheaus, but I'm sure I butchered that name. But yeah, it's not good. I think it's going to be more Devontae type stuff. And I'd love to see them throw the ball to Swift more. For fantasy, it's he got 20 more opportunities against Dallas, but he has to score all his touchdowns from outside the 3-yard line because when they get inside the 3-yard line, it's just Hurts tush push. So
yeah, and their running game has not. It looked great early in the season, and it's slowed down quite a bit. At least their like base running with the running backs has slowed down considerably.
Number 4 story from Week 9 was the C.J. Stroud absolute eruption against the Bucs. One of the best rookie quarterback games ever. 30 of 42 for 470 yards with 5 touchdowns and no interceptions. You can see some videos on Twitter there. He made some insane throws in this game. And by the way, he's doing this with a brutal offensive line that is very banged up, and like Noah Brown and Dalton Schultz in big roles. And as much as I like Nico and Tank Dell, I wouldn't call them superstars either. So just an incredible Stroud performance. I think we talked a lot about this one. I talked a bunch about it on the solo pod. But I mean, once Dameon Pierce was ruled out, and you know Tampa's really good against the run and worse against the pass. I mean, they actually let C.J. Stroud really cook. A lot of first down throws were called for C.J. Stroud here. Evan, what do you think of C.J. Stroud's breakout? And by the way, there were some like negative vibes around C.J. Stroud leading up to the draft process. He's making a lot of people look bad.
Yeah, the opinions were very, very mixed on C.J. Stroud coming out of Ohio State. At this point, he is elevating the players around him. And we talk a lot about how that is maybe the quarterback trait that, you know, defines like a truly elite quarterback. And I mean, you got to think he's on his way because he's extremely accurate. He throws with anticipation. And not all quarterbacks can do that. Even, you know, like high quality NFL quarterbacks, they can't all do that. Throw with consistent accuracy in an anticipatory manner. Lightning quick delivery. This offense is humming right now, and I wish that I could have got this the week before when I was all in on Stroud in DFS against the Panthers. They kind of got out coached in that game, came back and went to work, especially in the second half. Nico Collins and Tank Dell, probably not elite talents right now as we think of them, but man, they are performing at that level. Nico Collins right now is number 6 in the NFL in yards per route run. Tank Dell is number 17 in the NFL in yards per route run. Tank Dell's yards per route run right now, we often talk about 2 being that mark, at least historically for the rookies. You hit 2 yards per route run as a rookie, and you are in like elite historical company. He's at 2.3 right now.
Really impressive stuff. Singletary did flop as the feature back with Dameon Pierce out. I mean, we know Devin Singletary is not that explosive or good of an NFL running back. 13 carries, 26 yards, 0 rushing touchdowns, caught 2 balls for 0 yards. Inefficiency against this Tampa run defense is going to happen. I think he can be more efficient against Cincy next week if Dameon Pierce is out, but game plan I think is going to be more and more Stroud going forward. Giants, 5th and final story of week 9. I mean, they're down as bad as you can possibly be down. They go out to Las Vegas, get smoked by AOC and the Raiders, and they also in the process lose Danny Dimes to an ACL tear, who they just signed to like a $160 million contract or something like that. And you remember Tyrod Taylor, who was playing pretty well, I thought, he's on IR right now with ribs. They're down to Tommy DeVito, who I do not know if he's related to Danny DeVito or not, but Tommy DeVito is going to be the quarterback going forward. They are 16-point dogs at Dallas this week. If you have Saquon Barkley, if you have any Giants, I'm not even sure what you can do at this point. Evan, any Giants thoughts here?
I would strongly try to consider trading Saquon Barkley right now. Darren Waller is also out for 3 more games.
Yep.
And Evan Neal, right tackle, who they drafted, I believe, at number 7 overall a couple years ago, he had been out with a high right ankle sprained his left ankle in week 9 against the Raiders. So they really just cannot catch a break. Saquon did have a one big run in this game, 26 yards, but other than that, I mean, you remember there was like a 4-week or so blip last season where Saquon Barkley just seemed like there were 5 defenders around him at all times. I don't see any reason to believe that defenses wouldn't pursue him in the same way because the Giants are just down bad, like bad.
Bad. For sure. Yeah. I mean, 16 points. The Giants are implied for like 12 points this week, similar to what the Browns were implied for. I'm sorry, what the Cardinals were implied for last week when they went to Cleveland to face the Browns. We'll get into that soon. All right, let's go to the NFC now. We'll go alphabetical here. Arizona. Just mentioned, I mean, no prayer whatsoever with Clayton Tune against this elite Browns defense. The Arizona Cardinals scored 0 points in this game. They had 7 first downs the entire game. They generated 58 yards of offense. That's the 17th fewest yards generated in the history of the NFL. But we know what they're doing. I mean, it was smart. Maybe Kyler could have been back, but it would have been so dumb to play Kyler here. He would have looked terrible against Cleveland. You tank his draft value. You probably lose the game anyways, and you want to be losing. You know, you want to have a chance to get Drake May or Caleb Williams, or if you want, stick with Kyler and go take Marvin Harrison or something like that. So listen, Arizona is doing what they do. The story for fantasy, I think, is that Kyler is expected back this week. Evan, what are your expectations rest of season for Arizona now that we know Kyler for sure is coming back this week?
Yeah, he's already been named the starter for week 10 against Atlanta, which is not a super imposing opponent. James Conner is tentatively due back this week. I know he's eligible to come off injured reserve. That'll be something that we'll be closely monitoring. He was getting a lot of work early in the season, and in his place, no one really stepped up. I had people asking me like, oh, should I play Keontae Ingram this week? And I was like, no, I mean, you can try it, you know, but I mean, that's a horrible matchup and not a very good player. Michael Wilson missed this game. We'll see on his status. I mean, Kyler is definitely going to be an upgrade on what they had, on what they've been trotting out there so far. I don't know how much they're going to run him. You know, that'll be really interesting to see because that was such a big part of his fantasy game. Now he's coming off multiple knee ligament tears. How much are they going to run him?
I do think the biggest boost goes to Trey McBride and Marquise Brown. Marquise Brown was seeing so many uncatchable balls. Kyler will be better at that. They'll just sustain drives for longer with Kyler. And yeah, Trey McBride has a really good role right now. I would expect that he keeps that even when Zach Ertz gets back, but we'll see. Let's go to Atlanta. I mean, this was like the nail in the coffin. The Falcons Laundry Bros have been all over me. I haven't been saying anything bad about Arthur Smith, but they are all over it, so defensive, until this was the straw that broke the camel's back. You lose to Josh Dobbs, who just got to the team like 48 hours earlier. You lose to the Falcons. You lose to the Vikings in a game that Tyler Algier got 12 carries. Bijan Robinson got 11 in a game that freaking Jonnu Smith got a goal line carry, in a game that Jonnu out-targets Pitts 6-5. Even with Drake London out, Bijan only gets 4 targets out of 38 Heineke attempts. And the crazy thing is, like, at the goal line, I mean, they don't even look. Tyler Algier has 10 carries from inside the 10-yard line. Bijan has 2. So I think now at 4-5, like, the straw has broken the back. It's time for changes. They play at Arizona this week and then the bye in week 11. So even Falcons Laundry has now turned on Arthur Smith. Evan, any thoughts on this? This was a really bad loss for the Falcons.
You know, to me, just the definition of good coaching has always kind of been like, are you good, at least on the offensive side of the ball, are you good at getting the ball to your best players? And that just does not seem to be a priority for Arthur Smith. Tyler Heineke was not good in this game. Actually, the stats don't even show. The stats actually don't look that bad. But he had like 5, maybe 6 interceptable passes. Drake London was out for this game. CPAT left with an ankle injury. But yeah, I mean, Bijan Robinson not getting the ball as much as he should be is super, super frustrating, you know, especially in games that they lose. I mean, I don't know. I mean, do you think that Arthur Smith is on the hot seat yet?
I don't think he's far off. He shouldn't be far off. We'll see. I do think that
he's also like made himself to be like a very dislikable personality.
Yes.
Which does matter, like to owners, you know?
Sure. And like they see Bijan and Pitts as role players, which is totally fine, except you use the number 4 overall pick on Pitts, the number 8 overall pick on Bijan, you know? So, I mean, to me, that's fireable for someone. Either the draft, the general manager screwed up, or the coaches are screwing up by not using them. I actually played Bijan in DFS this week. And I was just, as soon as like the first quarter was over, I was like, I cannot believe that I did this. I put actual dollars on Arthur Smith. It's just, Bijan's a role player, period. So Carolina fell behind 20-3 at home to Gardner Minshew's Colts. Panthers are now 1-7. Bryce Young, another embarrassing performance. 3 more interceptions. 2 of them were pick sixes, takes 4 sacks. I mean, Evan called it, the Kenny Moore stuff on Adam Thielen was not great. Kenny Moore ends up returning 2 interceptions for a touchdown. I'm not going to say that's like the reason Thielen got shut down, but it certainly didn't help. Evan, what do you think of Panthers' latest embarrassment?
Yeah, Kenny Moore was also the number 1 graded defender in the entire league in week 9 by Pro Football Focus. So he had an awesome game, and Adam Thielen did not. 5 for 29, still tied for the team lead in targets. I think he's going to be fine going forward. I don't know if Bryce Young is going to be, though. I mean, There's reason for significant doubt at this point. I know we're only halfway through his rookie season. The comparison to him was Drew Brees coming out of college. Do you know how perfect you have to be Drew Brees? I mean, you have to do everything right because there are like legitimate talent limitations. Look, the Panthers need to put a lot more talent around Bryce Young to give him a chance, but it's been really, really rough to this point. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if at some point they sit him back down, let him breathe for a little bit, and play Andy Dalton.
Yeah. From a fantasy perspective, they did stick mostly with Chuba Hubbard as the feature back. 22 opportunities for Chuba Hubbard, 11 for Miles Sanders, 2 for Raheem Blackshear. So, Chuba hasn't been great, but I still think that he's better than Miles Sanders. Bears go down to New Orleans. They hung in the game again with Tyson Bagent. I mean, I would say 2 things. First, Deontay Foreman goes full workhorse, 20 carries. Rashawn Johnson got just 2. And also, there's something going on with Tyson Bagent and Cole Kmet. 18 targets over the last 2 games for Cole Kmet from Bagent, 27% share. At the tight end position, anyone getting 20% more or more of the targets, doesn't matter who your quarterback is going to be viable. And what do you think of Bears' loss down there in New Orleans?
Yeah, and slow game for DJ Moore, although he had some really close opportunities in scoring position. He hits 1 or 2 of those, and we're probably not, complaining, and the Bears would actually maybe win this game. Deontay Foreman is good, and Khalil Herbert is back practicing at full strength already. So he's going to be good to go. He's going to be playing on Thursday night against the Panthers. But I think it's going to be interesting to see how they divvy up this workload. They still like Rashawn Johnson. He can pass protect. And Khalil Herbert was running pretty well before he went down. But Deontay Foreman has really run the ball really well. And with him as the lead back, they're running – well, I would say over the course of the season, their running game has actually been pretty good. And you can run on the Panthers. So I have not written this game up yet because I'm waiting on field stuff. Yeah. There are 2 games posted, 2 matchup games posted. But I don't know. What do you think about Fields? I'm thinking it's going to be Bagent again.
I think on a short week it might be Bagent again, but I do think Fields should be owned in fantasy right now. I know it's been really up and down. It's hard to find players on waivers who can score 30 points in a game, and Justin Fields can certainly do that.
Yeah.
Let's go to Dallas. So they lose in Philly, but man, Dak was amazing again. And I know you can throw on this Eagles team. Like, that is what you do against the Eagles. We talked about how their corners have been getting slower and they have problems in the secondary. This is the second straight week that Dallas has had a very pass-centric attack. And I think that suits them. I mean, they had a ton of chances to win this game. And by the way, Tony Pollard just cannot catch a break. He had a touchdown wiped away in this game because an offensive lineman did not speak to a ref. Let me say that again. The offensive lineman didn't go up to the ref when he came in and say something in his ear. And then Tony Pollard scores and they throw a flag because whatever, he didn't report. I mean, what kind of rule is that? What kind of game are we playing here where you have to go up off the sideline and speak to the ref before you run the play? Whatever. I'm just tilting, but still is what it is. And what do you think of Dallas's narrow loss in Philly?
Yeah, this is a sport where we're still confirming or denying first downs based on a chain,
Yeah.
a literal freaking chain. So, I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. Let's be real. Yeah, Dak was just awesome, out of structure, especially in this game against Philadelphia. CeeDee Lamb is on an absolute rampage over his last 3 games. Jake Ferguson has stepped up as like a legit number 2 pass catching option, like a quality number 2 pass catching option in this offense. Michael Gallup is starting to lose snaps to Jalen Tolbert, which I think is deserved because Michael Gallup isn't good anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I also thought it was interesting. So Michael Gelkin, who he's covered the Cowboys now for probably about a half decade, and he does really good work. He was talking about how Michael Gallup has started to lose snaps to Jalen Tolbert, and he was like, and it's also time for the Cowboys to start giving snaps to Rico Dowdle at the expense of Tony Pollard. I don't know if that's something that he heard or just something, just commentary from Michael Gelkin, but I think that Rico Dowdle is a good rest of season stash, not just because, he could be a fantasy starter if something happens to Tony Pollard, but I don't know. Are they going to start making some changes with their running game?
It's possible. It's possible. I mean, and the advanced metrics are not good for Tony Pollard. They're just not, period. But they did give him a ton more chances in this game. They have some clean matchups coming up starting this week as a 16-point home favorite against the New York Football Giants. Let's go to Detroit. Detroit was on a bye in week 9. They will come out of it to play at the Chargers, who will be on a short week. Expecting David Montgomery back in this game. I also expect them to get Donovan Peoples-Jones involved. Remember, they traded for Donovan Peoples-Jones at the deadline. I'm curious, Evan, how you're thinking about the Gibbs-Montgomery split as they come out of their bye, and any DPJ thoughts.
Dan Campbell talked extensively about this on Monday, and it just sounded like from his comments that they're going to go 50-50. Remember early in the season, Dave Montgomery was like the feature back, and Jahmyr Gibbs was the change of pace. I think they're going to go to 50-50. But I mean, it's going to be a big blow to Jahmyr Gibbs with Dave Montgomery coming back, like no question, around the goal line. They love Dave Montgomery. They think that, they love the way that he runs, kind of complements the personality of the team.
I always thought, even going back to the preseason, that no matter what Jahmyr Gibbs, Dave Montgomery would be the goal line back, would be in that like Jamal Williams role. He earned more than the Jamal Williams role, but now that Jahmyr Gibbs has been playing awesome, I agree with Evan. It's going to be much, much tighter, but I still think Dave Montgomery is way better bet for touchdowns here.
And in high octane offenses, we can deal with 2-man committees. Both guys are fantasy starters. Sure. It's when you get to like 3-man committees or bad offenses that use 2 backs. We try to stay away from those. But in really good offenses, we can have both backs be quality fantasy starters.
Any DPJ role thoughts, Evan? I know some people asked about picking up Donovan Peoples-Jones off of waivers here. They do have some guys that they can play. Obviously, Jameson Williams has been not great, but they did lose Marvin Jones. Josh Reynolds hasn't been great. So, yeah, any thoughts on DPJ role going forward?
I think that he would probably need a Josh Reynolds injury to become truly fantasy viable. But, I mean, you can try it. Again, can't ever discourage anyone from trying to take shots on players in a high-octane offense. I mean, you could put them on your bench and just see what happens.
What are the Packers? So Packers got a break here as Matthew Stafford was ruled out. So they face Brett Rippon, who completes just 46% of his passes. Very good performance by the Packers defense. Of course, a lot of defense will look good against Brett Rippon. The big thing that I thought was notable was the Packers said that it was time to unleash Aaron Jones from his hamstring woes, and they did it against the Rams. 41 snaps for Aaron Jones in this game, 29 for A.J. Dillon, 8 for Manuel Wilson. Jones also ran 16 routes. Jones had 26 opportunities compared to Dillon's 10. And so you can see what Aaron Jones can do out there when he's healthy. He's still going to be limited by Jordan Love and the quality of this offense, but Aaron Jones is going to be in play a lot of weeks now going forward. Evan, any thoughts on Packers win over the Rams?
Yeah, that's the big takeaway is Aaron Jones getting back into a role where he can be the centerpiece of this offense because that's what they need and what they felt that they needed. And, and the Packers, the passing game at this point is just very widely distributed. I know that there was some fear that Christian Watson suffered a concussion in this game, but he was cleared afterwards. But it's very, very widely distributed. I mean, there's nobody hogging targets or anything. It's Luke Musgrave, Dontavian Wicks gets in there quite a bit. Watson plays really the most snaps of the wide receivers. Romeo Doubs has a full-time role. Aaron Jones is back, and he is going to command targets weekly. And Jaden Reed plays quite a bit too. So it's not a fun passing game to have investments in right now at all.
I know. It's bad. Christian Watson left this game early due to head, back, and neck injuries. Sounds like he's okay, but we'll see. Dude has been banged up pretty much all year and just, burying me. I mean, burying me.
Yeah, he had been over 80% of the snaps in 3 straight games entering this one. So I was like, all right, maybe finally we're out of the woods, but nope.
I'm on a full-blown ramen diet from Christian Watson. Rams. So as I said, Stafford could not go in this game. I mean, Brett Rippon just had no chance. Even with Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua, just no chance. They do have a bye this week, and then I do think Stafford will be back. When they get back for this game, though, this is like the last stand. I mean, they're 3-6 right now. If they go to 3-7 or 3-8, it could get real ugly. Like, why should Stafford and Kupp really push it hard through these injuries? So I'm worried for the fantasy playoffs for these Rams guys. Do expect Kyren Williams back after the bye as well. Any Rams thoughts, Evan?
Well, that was actually the one note that I had, that Sean McVay came out and said that Kyren Williams is not going to be back in week 11. He'll be back in week 12.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Vikings. This was crazy, man. They traded for Josh Dobbs to be their starter, but he wasn't quite ready yet. Nick Mullins was still out. So they start this Jaren Hall kid. Early in the game, Jaren Hall gets concussed near the goal line. So Dobbs, who literally didn't know cadences or plays or teammates, he comes in, goes 20 of 30 for 158 yards with 2 touchdowns, no interceptions to beat Arthur Smith's Falcons. It really is one of the most amazing stories that we've seen in a while, just to come cold to a new team, 48, 72 hours, and win a game. What do you think of Vikings' rousing win? I mean, they're rallying right now. I think they've won 4 straight games. If I'm not, they've won 4 straight games. I mean, somehow.
Yeah, I know.
What do you think of the Vikings?
I thought they were just totally cooked, like a month ago. And now, they have a chance to get Justin Jefferson back within the next 2 weeks, maybe. They started out with Jaren Hall, and Jaren Hall actually didn't play poorly at all. And it's a small sample. But he went 5 of 6 for 78 yards right off the bat, and had 2 runs for 11 yards. And then he gets concussed, or they thought he was concussed, but he wasn't concussed. I don't know. It doesn't matter. I think it's going to be the Josh Dobbs show for the foreseeable future, I think. I don't know. What do you think about that, actually?
Yeah, I think it'll be Dobbs. I think it'll be Dobbs, especially considering the way he played in this game, coming in cold. So, yeah. And also, Dobbs did this without Justin Jefferson, who I don't expect to be back for week 10, but could be back for week 11. And KJ Osborne got knocked out of this game with a really nasty concussion, and Dobbs still came in and played well and won the game. So, yeah.
Yep. And I think one thing I know you're gonna talk about Cam Akers.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to say about Dobbs, this is a very quarterback friendly system with some big time weapons, especially when Justin Jefferson gets back, and Jordan Addison and TJ Hawkinson and KJ Osborne will be back probably within the next 2 weeks. There's a chance that Josh Dobbs is like a legit top 15 guy with his rushing ability the rest of the way, assuming that they do go with him. And I'm like you, I think that they will. I mean, they play indoors. Their defense will give up points. Like, Josh Dobbs has a chance to be a fantasy factor in the second half of the season.
Yeah, it's crazy, but it's probably true. The Cam Akers injury sucks for him. I mean, another Achilles tear. This one, I feel like, has to end his career. So shout out to Cam Akers. But Alexander Mattison struggled again running the football. I think he's not good, but also this run game is kind of broken. Madison did at least get a 47-yard touchdown catch in this game, showed some ability to get out there in space, but obviously workload projections going forward for Madison are going to be big, and this Akers injury will also bring I believe Ty Chandler back into the mix, although, God, I haven't been following what's been going on with him at all. He's been like completely out of the mix. So yeah.
Who's that?
Ty Chandler.
Oh, yeah. Jeez. Yeah. Nope. Not happening.
Saints. So the Saints narrowly beat the Bears at home on a day that turned into Taysom Hill Day. Taysom had 11 carries compared to just 9 for Alvin Kamara and 3 for Jamal Williams. Taysom also threw a touchdown, and he caught a touchdown on 5 targets. So when this Taysom stuff happens, it's hard to get there. And I played a bunch of Carr stacks in tournaments. Started off well, fizzled out because Taysom just took over. And Kamara's usage has gotten really bad lately, which has been shocking to me. So really weird game overall for the Saints, even though they won. Any thoughts on Saints stuff, Evan?
It's somewhat notable that Kendra Miller suffered an ankle injury in this game, but he doesn't really have a role anyways. Jamal Williams does, though, and it was almost equal, at least in terms of playing time, not in terms of touches. Because when Kamara's in, like, he gets the ball. But in terms of playing time, Kamara was 49% in this game, and Jamal Williams was 43%.
It's ridiculous.
And Taysom Hill had freaking 15 touches.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm all of a sudden I'm like getting worried about Alvin Kamara. I mean, he was averaging 26 touches per game coming into this, and then all of a sudden he's like almost in like a 3-way committee.
Yeah, maybe they just thought they were overextending his workload and they need to back off some. I mean,
well, that's what Dennis Allen. I saw some quotes from Dennis Allen that they're doing this intentionally. I mean, you know, they want to make sure that they're using multiple backs.
I thought this was an awesome spot for Chris Olave. He caught a touchdown. He caught 6 balls, but again, not an explosive day for Chris Olave. Continues to frustrate even on a day he caught 6 balls and a touchdown. It's just, yeah, he doesn't seem to be on the same page as Carr as much as he was with Jameis Dalton types. Seahawks. This is one of the worst games I've seen the Seahawks play in the quote-unquote Geno Smith era. I mean, man, they got absolutely smoked. Good news for Kenneth Walker owners, though. Kenneth Walker, we talked about last week how Zach Charbonnet actually got ahead of Walker in usage. In this game, first 3 quarters, even though they were trailing pretty much the whole way, Walker had 12 opportunities, Zach Charbonnet 5. So I think that's pretty standard and what we should expect going forward. We talked about last week not overreacting to the Charbonnet usage from week 8. Evan, any thoughts on the Seahawks getting smoked out there in Baltimore?
I mean, the Seahawks went on the road to face the best defense in the league, and they were able to fire off 47 plays. Fire off is not the right terminology. They were able to manage 47 offensive plays and got nothing going offensively. I mean, the Ravens defense is freaking awesome. They're allowing 4.6 yards per pass attempt, by far fewest in the league, and they have 35 sacks. And I mean, do they even have a big time pass rusher? Yeah. I mean, they don't have like a Myles Garrett or anything like that. They are absolutely humming on defense, and they just completely demolished really like a top 10 offense in the league. I mean, the Seahawks coming into this game were number 10 in offensive DVOA and number 6 in pass offense DVOA. So, I mean, the Ravens are a force to be reckoned with. They face the Browns next.
Speaking of next, awesome bounce back spot for the Seahawks here, home against the Commanders in week 10. I mean, you can't draw it up much better than that. You get embarrassed, then you get to go home and face probably the best matchup for fantasy, not just because the defense of the Commanders is so bad, but also because the Commanders are going to throw the ball so much and generate so many plays on both sides of the ball. San Francisco will come out of their bye to play at Jacksonville. I believe Deebo Samuel will be back, and I also thought it was a good chance to get Brock Purdy kind of a mind reset here during the bye. Made some really bad throws, did Purdy before the bye. Expect him to settle back in here. Really good game between San Francisco and Jacksonville. We'll talk about that more on Friday night, but any San Francisco thoughts as they come out of their bye, Evan?
Yeah, I think that they're going to come out screaming. I mean, they do. I mean, Jacksonville's a tough team, but the 49ers, when they're locked in, and I think that they should be locked in coming off this bye, Trent Williams should be back. I think Deebo Samuel's definitely going to be back. He's already practicing. Aaron Banks, their left guard. I mean, they're without their left tackle and their left guard in the game prior, and they still had in week 8, before their week 9 bye, in that game that they lost to Cincinnati, they had the number 1 offensive success rate in the league, and they averaged 8 yards per play. So and over his last 3 starts, Brock Purdy is averaging almost 9 yards per pass attempt. He's had some very ill-timed turnovers, but the notion that their offense is taking a really big step back or anything like that's not true. Again, you can't turn the ball over, but they're moving the ball, like, no question. And I wanted to note, because in this upcoming game, Jacksonville plays a ton of zone, and we've noticed that, Brandon Ayuk tends to be better against man coverage. Deebo tends to be better against zone because the team will give up catches, and he's really good after the catch. So just something to note as we enter this 49ers-Jaguars game.
Okay. We'll talk a bunch more about that on Friday. Breaking news into the show. Carson Wentz has been signed by the Los Angeles Rams, presumably to be the backup ahead of Brett Rippon. Again, I do think Matthew Stafford will be back after the bye, but Carson Wentz is now a Los Angeles Ram. Yes, just confirming that's true, and yes, looks like it is. Okay.
You didn't get it from one of those fake accounts?
I hope not.
Okay.
Tampa. Baker continues to play all right, man. And Baker in the offense puts up 37 points on the road in Houston. Still not enough. Still not enough because CJ Stroud went absolutely nuke. One thing I've been thinking about is, like, maybe I've been too hard on Rachaad White efficiency stuff because he's like Alvin Kamara with his pass game role. I mean, this guy's going to catch 70, 75 balls this year. And that is an incredible amount at the running back position when you're also getting feature back carries. So I probably underestimated Rachaad White's role and how good it would be this year. And I've honestly probably underestimated Baker's ability to keep this offense afloat. What do you think of Bucs going into Houston and losing a wild one?
Yeah, I felt bad when you said on Sunday, my boy, Cade Otton, and I looked up and dude is like all of a sudden dominating, goes 6 for 70 with 2 touchdowns, Yeah, Rachaad White, I mean, especially lately, he started off the season, they weren't really feeding him that much in the passing game, but over like the last month, he's been a machine in the passing game, and he still wasn't efficient on the ground here, but they haven't, found any backs that they want to give the ball over him. So he's going to keep getting volume and getting, scoring position chances, and again, being used heavily in the passing game. And that has a lot of value at the running back position in fantasy football.
Cade Otton is the kind of guy, the kind of tight end who we know he's out there all the time. It's hard to predict when these blow-up games will pop up. He'll have 1 or 2 a year just because he's out there all the time. But most of his games, we're projecting around 3 catches or something like that. And
right.
I think, is what it is. Last NFC team is the Washington football team. So they go into Foxborough. Sam Howell, predictably at this point, drops back an insane 52 times. I mean, this guy is on pace to drop back like 45 average dropbacks, like 45, 46 times per game. It's absolutely insane. 9 different pass catchers in week 9 saw at least 2 targets. This is turning into Kansas City, man. They throw on every play, and the target tree is so spread. It's a problem for Dotson and McLaurin. Even with Curtis Samuel out, they can't earn alpha target shares. But it's crazy to me. I mean, Bieniemy is running this offense as if he has Patrick Mahomes. Throw on every play, drop back 50 times, and throw the ball to 10 different guys every game. I like it. It's fun. But, man, I don't think he has Patrick Mahomes. He has Sam Howell. So, anyways, Evan, what do you think of Washington's win up there in Foxborough?
It was a frustrating game for me because I like this game to be somewhat high scoring and to definitely go over the total of 41. And I thought I looked at it at halftime. It was 14-10, and then Washington scored 10 in the third quarter and 0 points in the fourth quarter. So missed that over. Yeah, I mean, I don't have a lot to add to, your commentary on Washington. Like they've kind of shown themselves that that's what they're going to be. And it's kind of nice because it's reliable. Like we can reliably bank on the Commanders to throw the ball a lot, be aggressive through the passing game. They run a lot of plays. They play pretty fast, and Sam Howell's aggressive. So although they're not, a particularly good team or anything like that, they can be very valuable for us in fantasy football.
Last note I had on Washington was just Brian Robinson, kind of a good result for him. He got a touchdown and he also fumbled. And at that point, I was like, oh, they might just bench him. But they didn't. They went right back to Brian Robinson. So I thought that was notable on him. All right, let's move to the AFC now. We'll start with the Buffalo Bills. And it seems like the Bengals have the Bills' number for whatever reason. They win here on Sunday night pretty easily. The Bills also lost that divisional playoff game last year to the Bengals. The Bengals were winning the game when the DeMar Hamlin thing happened last year. So, yeah, these Bills-Bengals games are awesome. Bengals seem to have it figured out. The good thing for the Bills, I thought, was another rushing TD and 844-1 rushing for Josh Allen. Most of his rushes now haven't been by design, but he's been a very willing rusher. He's actually fantasy's number one quarterback right now, I think, ahead of Jalen Hurts. So he's trying to make plays. It's been tough out there, though. Evan, what do you think of Bills' loss on Sunday Night Football to the Bengals?
We continue to get like big time production out of Stephon Diggs every single week. Dalton Kincaid has emerged as just a massive part of that offense. I think that when Dawson Knox comes back, they need to figure out a way to keep Dalton Kincaid humming because that dude can play. Khalil Shakir has taken over a significant role as the Bills have transitioned from a 2 tight end offense to an 11 personnel offense. Khalil Shakir, their top slot receiver, is now like, a significant part of their offense. Gabe Davis, we thought that his week 8 was promising because they gave him layup routes and he just disappears in this game, goes catchless on 2 targets against Cincinnati. Dalton Kincaid did suffer a lower leg contusion, but he went back into the game, and I think he's going to be fine.
Yeah, the Gabe Davis thing was frustrating. I actually thought that what they did with Gabe Davis in week 8 was what they should be doing. I didn't see any reason for them to go away from that. And then Gabe Davis just airballs. And man, that's been super, super frustrating. Dalton Kincaid's role since Dawson Knox has been out has been awesome. 77% of the snaps, 111 routes, 136 Josh Allen dropbacks, and earning a 22% target share. Has caught 23 of 26 passes for 221 and 1 since Dawson Knox went down. So, yeah, the Kincaid stuff certainly looks good. Leonard Fournette was not active for this game, but he might be active going forward. I think he'll have like a bit role. We talked a lot about that last week, but yeah, something to monitor for sure there on the uncle himself, Uncle Lenny.
So, and I know some people were talking about this in our private Slack, but so entering this game, I was like, I wanted to do Joe Burrow MVP stuff at 20, yes, somewhere between 20 and 22 to 1. I got it at 22 to 1 early last week. It's already down to 7 to 1. Now on the other side of this game, Josh Allen is he was at 12 to 1 last week to win MVP. Now he shoots down to like 20 to 1. I think even if you took the Burrow, you take Josh Allen too, because now he's got a primetime game coming up against Denver on Monday night. So he's going to be back in the limelight, and he could have a monster game in that one. So I think you bet both.
Yeah, and that's the thing about building a portfolio. We talked about this on the awards show with Reynolds a bunch. If you're building a portfolio of awards, getting a lot of players at their best possible price. The Joe Burrow 22 to 1 was like the best price that you could find all season. Josh Allen now 22 to 1 is the best price also that you've had on Josh Allen all season. Bengals in this game, I thought it was a really good sign that T. Higgins looked back. I mean, 8 catches, 110 yards. And I know there was some smoke around him at the trade deadline. You can't trade T. Higgins. Even if you're going to lose him this offseason, which I think the Bengals will end up losing T. Higgins this offseason, you can't trade him because your window to win the Super Bowl is right now. Like, this is it, and you need T. Higgins there. They have gone so pass heavy. They lead the entire NFL in pass rate over expectation over the last 5 weeks. They know where their bread is buttered. Still worried about Jamar Chase's back going forward, but regardless, Joe Burrow throwing the ball and throwing it so well all over the field is exciting for this offense. Evan, what do you think of Bengals win over the Bills on Sunday night?
Yeah, the only note that I had was that is just that Joe Burrow moving down from 22 to 1 to 7 to 1. One thing that I did like to hear from Joe Burrow after the Sunday Night Football game. He was talking about how he went out of his way to get the ball to T. Higgins in this game because T. Higgins hadn't been getting the ball.
Yeah.
And he wants to keep his playmakers happy. And you remember we used to do this with Peyton Manning. I think it was in Denver with Demarius and Eric Decker. And people would be like, oh, that's just a narrative that Peyton wants to keep his pass catchers healthy. No, that was a real thing. Tony Dungy, who was Peyton's head coach in Indianapolis, would talk about how Peyton would do that on purpose. Joe Burrow actually has drawn some Peyton Manning comparisons, much more athletic. But anyways, I like to hear that he wants to keep his playmakers healthy, and he did that. He accomplished that with T. Higgins on Sunday night.
Yep. And if Jamar Chase ends up missing this game against Houston this week, they're going to need a ton of T. Higgins. You saw all the tight end stuff going on. They targeted tight ends a ton. The problem is they're playing all three. Team preseason hero, Tanner Hudson, Irv Smith, Drew Sample are all part of a rotation there. Yeah. So I don't think there's much to chew on, but they were targeting them a ton in that game for whatever reason.
Yeah, even Mitchell Wilcox got playing time. But, I mean, look, you can attack the Bills' defense at this point, and you can definitely attack them in the middle of the field. They've dealt with injuries at safety. Matt Milano is out for the year. He's been their, shutdown linebacker against tight ends. And, of course, they lost Tremaine Edmonds in the offseason to the Bears.
For the Browns, I mean, this is what everyone expected. Arizona with Clayton Tune going to Cleveland to face this defense. Just an absolute bloodbath. Cleveland's defense dominated. I thought it was good to see Jerome Ford looking relatively healthy. They gave him 20 carries and 7 targets in a game they easily could have won without Jerome Ford. So yeah, that was good to see. The other good story was a pretty good game from Deshaun Watson. 19 of 30 for 219 with 2 touchdowns. A lot of it to Amari Cooper. Evan, what do you think of Deshaun Watson's return? Any other Browns stuff?
Yeah, and now the matchup doesn't really get softer than Arizona, which really struggles to generate pressure. But probably Deshaun Watson's best start as a Cleveland Brown. He's got 11 starts under his belt now. This was probably his best one. Yeah, I'm with you. I really like to see that usage from Jerome Ford. I was real worried about him when we kept hearing that he had a high ankle sprain. I mean, the guy clearly did not have a high ankle sprain. He comes back. He's the clear number. I mean, he played last week, but it was like a 3-man rotation. They pulled Pierre Strong out of the rotation this week. Kareem Hunt was still a factor, but Jerome Ford was clearly the number one. And Amari Cooper continues to really exceed expectations, I think. He's having a really good season. He still has strong home splits, which have, for whatever reason, have followed him since he was like a Raider. But no, another really good game for Amari Cooper.
Yeah. I did have a note on David Njoku. They're throwing him so many screens. I mean, his ADOT is down to 3.3 yards on the season. It was 1.0 against Arizona. It's a little bit of a concern, but I like when he gets scheme targets. That's good, but it's just hard to have big games when your ADOT is so low. Broncos were on a bye. They'll come out of it to play the Bills on Monday night. One thing we saw before the bye on the Broncos was Javonte Williams' usage was rising. I think that will be sticky. And then also, there was a quote from Sean Payton on Marvin Mims, like, he's in my notepad. I've been looking at ways to get him more, I don't buy it. I really don't, because it's hard to bench Judy and Sutton, and I'm not sure this offense can support 3 wide receivers anyways. So I've been cutting Mims in season long, and I feel okay about it despite this rhetoric from Sean Payton. Evan, any thoughts on that or anything else on the Broncos?
If you were a Mims stasher, you had to be very disappointed that they didn't trade any of their other wide receivers that they were heavily rumored to be shopping before the deadline.
Yep. Jaguars will come out of their bye to host the San Francisco 49ers. I haven't seen an update on Zay Jones. He could be back for this game. I'm not sure there yet, but man, before the bye, it was Travis Etienne playing really well, Christian Kirk playing really well, and this team just rolling. So yeah, any thoughts on Jacksonville as they come out of their bye?
Yeah, the only note that I had, and we talked about it on the last team by team, was that Calvin Ridley, they really went out of their way in their previous game to get the ball to Calvin Ridley. He had 5 for 72 in the first half. I continue to think that he's a screaming buy low. His buy is out of the way. You can throw the ball a little bit on the 49ers. So I think he's going to have a big second half.
Yeah, just to be clear on Zay Jones, This injury seems weird. They're calling him day to day, but then Doug Peterson was asked, is Zay going to go on IR? And he said, well, we're not going to rule that out. So I don't know what's going on with Zay Jones. Seems a little weird right now. Chiefs. So this was, I thought, going to be an awesome game. I'm obviously up early on Sundays. I was watching the game while I was working on stuff, this game in Germany. Mahomes comes out hot against the Dolphins. They get up 21-0, I believe. Looks like they're going to run away with it. But then the offense just couldn't do anything. They get up 21-0, don't score the rest of the game. Kelsey, 3 catches for 14 yards. Mahomes only throws for 185 on 30 attempts. They relied on the defense to win. And again, they can win that way. So, yeah, any thoughts on the Chiefs game against the Dolphins out there in Germany?
I like the Dolphins went out of their way to take away Travis Kelsey. I mean, they mugged him up on all obvious passing downs. I don't really have any other great notes other than Rashee Rice, since week 5, has the highest passer rating in the NFL when targeted.
Yeah.
But I think he had only 2 targets in this game. This is one thing that stood out from this game is if you just look at the box score, like the distribution of targets right now is gross.
Yeah.
It's gross. So Mahomes had 32 dropbacks and no one was targeted more than 5 times. And that guy with 5 targets was Justin Watson. So that's not fun for us.
That's the thing. I thought that if Justin Watson was out the rest of the year, that Rashee Rice's role would have kept ascending. But with Justin Watson back, he's going to regress. I mean, he's going to run around 55 to 60% of the routes. And that's great because he's good at earning targets and he's been very good, but they just don't seem to have interest in making Rashee Rice an alpha. Maybe that'll change, but I'm kind of skeptical at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Chiefs game, Chargers game last night, they go into MetLife and, not the greatest performance by Justin Herbert and the Chargers, but when you're facing Zach Wilson, you don't need a great performance. I am a little worried about Justin Herbert with these weapons. Josh Palmer's out. Big Mike Williams is done. They have to play Quentin Johnston and Jalen Guyton a ton. And I mean, these guys have been bad. Quentin Johnston is dead last out of all rookie wide receivers in yards per route run. He's 94th out of 101 among all wide receivers this year in yards per route run. Chargers are down bad with this pick. I mean, I don't want to compare it to like the Justin Jefferson, Jalen Reagor thing that the Eagles went through, but it does not look good right now for Quentin Johnston. Anyways, Evan, Chargers get a win. What do you think of their game last night against the Jets?
Yeah, Quentin Johnston he was a very polarizing guy coming out of college because he's a big receiver, but he's not really a contested catch winner at all. And a lot of the chances that the Chargers that Justin Herbert has given him on contested opportunities have not gone well. And you're right. I mean, they're limited at this point in terms of their weaponry, and that was something that you thought that they could hang their hat on coming into the season. Josh Palmer's on IR. He's not coming back for a while.
Yeah.
Austin Eckler looks good with the ball in his hands. He had 3 drops in this game. But yeah, I mean, they're limited in terms of their weaponry, no question.
Las Vegas, first game of the Antonio Pierce era, and I discounted the new coach narrative. And there's a long data you can go back through and look through how teams perform after their coach gets fired. And I think there is a little bit of signal there. I just thought the Raiders just don't have the personnel regardless to do it. But when you face the Giants and they lose Daniel Jones to an ACL tear in the first quarter or whatever it was, I mean, Raiders just absolutely rolled. But another quiet game for Devontae Adams. The big note I had here was after the game, Antonio Pierce was going on his rant about Josh Jacobs is our heartbeat. He's the focus of the team. And the specific thing that he said is we want to get Josh Jacobs to 100 yards. We know how important that is. That matters. There's a 100-yard bonus on DraftKings, which is worth 3 points. That's half a touchdown. I mean, if they're actually going to go out of their way to try to get Josh Jacobs 100 yards when he's at 90, that matters a lot for fantasy. So I think people should be aware of that. But anyways, Evan, any thoughts on Antonio Pierce's first head coaching stint, which went quite well?
Yeah, and I liked how he used the term century mark. Like that means something to Antonio Pierce. Like you don't usually hear coaches talk in specifics like that. So when he used the term, he didn't just say 100 yards. He said, we're going to get Josh Jacobs at the century mark.
Yeah.
Like that's like something that It matters to him. I also liked how Josh Jacobs was talking about something that the new coaching staff implemented was that they are going to really involve the players in the game planning process and the selection and play selection. And Josh Jacobs is now able to kind of like pick and choose which runs he likes. And so they're giving players more of a say, which would make sense for a player, a guy who was a big-time player in the NFL, Antonio Pierce. And if anybody got a chance, or if you get a chance, make sure you listen to the story of how really Antonio Pierce came to be the Raiders' interim head coach and how Josh McDaniels like expedited that after like a player and coach meeting.
Yeah, Glazer had a big thing on that. If you just search like Glazer Raiders on Twitter, you'll find Glazer's report there. Pretty interesting stuff. The Devontae Adams stuff, I think they're going to try to get him the ball, but with Aiden O'Connell at quarterback, they're playing the Jets this week. Devontae Adams stuff is not great right now. Dolphins go to Germany, lose to the Chiefs, as I said, in kind of a sluggish, lower scoring game than I thought it would be. Chiefs defense, again, very good. They hold Tua Tagovailoa to 5.7 yards per attempt. Tyreek Hill's longest catch was just 19 yards, which is really low for him. Dolphins get a break after this Germany game. They are on their bye here in week 10. And then the hero, the biggest fantasy buzz of the season, Devon Achane, is expected back for week 11. Any thoughts on Dolphins' loss out there in Germany, Evan?
The Chiefs' defense is just really good. And again, we've talked about this, at multiple points this season, but it almost works against their offense in some ways because they have like a legit top 5 defense. And that showed up here. They got really physical with the Dolphins receivers. They didn't play scared. They're not playing off coverage. Like they went up and played physical press coverage against Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, and they deserve credit for that. I mean, the Chiefs won that fair and square. Mike McDaniel was talking about how the number one thing that he's most excited about during this bye is to get Jalen Waddle back to 100% because he's such a big part of the offense, and nagging injuries to this point have prevented him from being a consistent high-impact player.
We talked about selling Raheem Mostert, I think like 2 or 3 weeks ago on the rest of the season top 150 show that I do with Mark and Jack. If you haven't done that yet, I would still think about doing it. He has a bye this week. Achane's expected back after the bye. The fantasy playoff schedule is brutal. Jets, Cowboys, Ravens is the Dolphins fantasy playoff schedule. So just wanted to keep that in mind for people out there. Patriots. They lose the Commanders, but the fantasy note I had here was on Demario Douglas, Pop Douglas. With Kendrick Bourne out, there was some concern that Demario Douglas would be strictly slot. That's not how they see it. In this game, Pop Douglas had 34 snaps out wide, 19 in the slot. Before this, he was in the slot 82% of the time. So Pop Douglas, by doing that, becomes a full-time player, 38 routes on 46 dropbacks, earned 7 targets in this game for a 16% share. So, I'm fine carrying Demario Douglas. I think through buys and injuries, you can probably use him on your team. Evan, any thoughts on Patriots stuff here after their latest loss, this time to the Commanders?
My note was that Tyquan Thornton, who, at this point, I don't think that he's going to help him. Yeah. But, they gave him an opportunity early in this game. He came in with a foot injury. He played, I think, 12 snaps. He runs a bad route, and he's not seen from again. So I'm pretty sure that he got benched, either that or he aggravated the injury. But he's just, for a guy who was a second-round pick last year, you'd expect something, and he's given them nothing. I don't foresee that changing at this point.
They're also running a ton of 2 tight end sets now, which was kind of expected in the wake of Kendrick Bourne's injury. Mike Gesicki airballed. He's just not that good. But Hunter Henry has a pretty good role, and if you're in a deeper league or you need tight end help, I'd at least take a look at Hunter Henry.
Yeah. It was very disappointing that, and this was a game where I got it wrong on the over on the total, but it was just very disappointing because Mac Jones wasn't under any duress. He took 1 hit in the game, was not sacked once on 44 dropbacks, and he still stunk. So Patriots offense. Remind me to not try to invest in them anymore.
Jets. I didn't have a lot here because there's not a lot to say when Zach Wilson is your quarterback. And I know I've been on this for like 2 years. You know, it is irresponsible what the Jets had at backup quarterback and that they have not tried to do anything. This is a very good team. I actually picked them to win the AFC East, before Rodgers got hurt. And I think they actually would have probably if Rodgers had stayed healthy. They have a very, very good team that has been completely kidnapped by Zach Wilson. The story after the game was Rodgers goes up to the midfield spot and he's talking to, I think he was talking to Derwin James. And Derwin James says, like, how you feeling? You coming back? And Rodgers says, yeah, give me a few weeks. I'll be back. This is a 39-year-old who blew out his Achilles less than 2 months ago. I don't think Aaron Rodgers is going to be back. But if he is, Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson are going to go nuts. If he's not and they stick with Zach Wilson, I'm like queasy about starting these guys on a week-to-week basis with Zach Wilson. So, yeah, I don't know, Evan. Any thoughts on that Rodgers stuff and anything else on the Jets?
Just Garrett Wilson is still having pretty good games.
Yeah.
And that's with Zach Wilson just extremely erratic and errant. And so hopefully Aaron Rodgers' prediction proves correct. Breece Hall had 20 touches in this game, just could find no room whatsoever to run. The state of the offensive line is real bad with the Jets right now. And I mean, that's also a potential obstacle for Aaron Rodgers when he comes back.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, I think one thing is, what if he thinks this is his last hurrah? And even if he blows out the Achilles again, let's just go for it. But they have to be in the race for him to do that. They do have a week 16 game home against the Commanders, obviously fantasy playoffs. That is an awesome spot if Rodgers does come back. Steelers squeeze out a late home win on Thursday Night Football over Will Levis and the Titans. I didn't think Kenny Pickett was very good, but he gets the touchdown to Deontay Johnson. I mean, we talked about how bad Deontay Johnson has been running on touchdowns, and then immediately he scores. And then the George Pickens stuff continues to rear its ugly head. When Deontay Johnson is out there, George Pickens runs go routes. It's hard to have reliable fantasy production when you're just out there running up the sidelines. So, yeah, Evan, what do you think of the Steelers? Another win. I don't know how they're winning games. They're a bad team, but they continue to win. Yeah. What do you think of their latest win against the Titans?
Yeah, I mean, Deontay Johnson, I thought looked great in this game. This was his second game back.
Yep.
From the hamstring injury.
Yeah.
And I thought he looked good in the first one too. Jaylen Warren had a career high 88 rushing yards, and he's outplaying Najee Harris, but they still think of Najee Harris as sort of like a bell cow type, and he plays more than Jaylen Warren and gets the ball in scoring position. So Jaylen Warren can be a tough guy to try to rely on in fantasy, even though he's clearly a good real life player.
Yeah, snaps were Najee 38, Warren 26. Opportunities were Najee 20, Warren 14. In a lot of games, though, due to the state of this team, they're not going to get that many running back touches off.
Apparently, George Pickens scrubbed his accounts of all things Steelers related after the game. And then Mike Tomlin was asked today, Tuesday, because the Steelers do their coaching press conference on Tuesday. He's what's the level of concern for George Pickens scrubbing his social media? And Mike Tomlin his response was, it's like a pebble in my shoe. So he doesn't, I think that he just wants to pull the pebble out and everything will be all right.
If they keep winning, he's going to win Coach of the Year because this team is bad.
Yeah. Shoot. What are his odds?
I don't have him right now, but I mean, I don't think they're going to keep winning, but if they do, I mean, he's got a real chance. Titans, last team here.
I mean, they've got Pittsburgh in a home game next. So they're about to be, they've got Green Bay at Pittsburgh next. So they're about to be 6-3.
Yeah. Last one we're going to do here is the Titans. Will Levis's second start, this time in Pittsburgh, as we just mentioned. They lose the game. Levis did not throw a touchdown pass, but I thought he made some awesome throws again. Like, he has a huge arm, but he also has an ability to put some touch on the ball. So I was, optimistic on Will Levis after another start, and the Titans seem to be as well. They have named Will Levis their starter going forward. Ryan Tannehill has been named the backup. Levis will not have Treylon Burks. Sounds like he's going to be out for a bit. Evan, what do you think of Will Levis's second NFL start there against the Steelers?
I thought he looked pretty darn good, and it's not in a great environment in Tennessee either, because they've got major offensive line woes. They just lost Nicholas Petit-Frere, who had been starting at offensive tackle. I think it was 2 games at right tackle, 1 at left tackle since he came off an injured list. He's out for the season, and this was already maybe the worst offensive line in the league. So Will Levis has helped to revive DeAndre Hopkins, and I think he's looked really, really good. I mean, he is willing to pull the trigger on downfield throws. He's got quality athleticism, and again, he has had success to an extent in a subpar offensive environment, and I think that that's impressive for a second-round rookie.
Extremely small sample, so probably nothing. But in Will Levis's 2 starts, Derrick Henry has seen 8 targets for a 12% share, and just something for Derrick Henry. I don't know how sticky that'll be, but that's a lot of targets for Derrick Henry, who historically has not earned them.
We will take that, definitely.
All right. That is going to do it for this week's Team by Team pod. Appreciate you all being here. If you can do us a favor, hit subscribe on YouTube. You get notified anytime we go live, and also wherever you listen to this on podcast, hit subscribe there as well so that new shows do pop up in your feed. For Evan, for producer Luke, for producer Ryan, for producer Steven, I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.